Hey everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week my first question comes from Cora the Last Scissor Bender, who says, Dear Steve, I want your advice or opinion on this. You see, I'm being judged for something by my friends. I said that if I had kids, I would prefer my kids to be straight over gay, bi, transgender. But if I still had gay, bi, transgender kids, that does not mean I would not accept them. I would still love them and support their lifestyle and how they live their lives. I support the LGBT community now. I just prefer them to be straight if I were to have kids. Maybe the reason is because I feel I could relate better to straight kids. Or maybe it would be an easier situation when it comes to raising them. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just not used to it. I'm not sure. I feel conflicted. Is this a wrong mindset? Well, I think the fact that you're concerned about it and the fact that you're feeling compelled to ask for advice about it from some idiot on YouTube, don't know how wise that is, but anyway, shows that you're being thoughtful about it, and you don't want to be or to come across as a closed-minded person or a bigoted person. So, I wouldn't worry about that as far as that goes. I don't know. Maybe it is fear. Maybe you think that you wouldn't be able to relate as well to a gay child or a transgender child, but I would suggest that that's probably not the case. I have known gay people. I have known transgender people. I have never found them to be difficult to relate to because of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. I really don't think that stuff matters all that much in terms of relating to people, being friends with people, and probably I would assume being parents to people. I just don't think that it matters. I think you take people as you find them, you relate to them as individuals, person to person, and these traits that they happen to have that might be different from yours or maybe different from what is your more everyday experience turn out to not really be that important. In Superman Returns, Superman does not throw a single punch. Okay, come on, seriously? That's not like a troll name to get a rise out of me? Come on, man! Dear Steve, aka Stuffy's bitch. Well, that much is true. I am a 20-year-old male feminist, and I want equality, but I'm stuck in a pickle. I have to admit there are times when I don't treat women equally. For example, if my brother punched me in the face, or any man, I would punch him back. If my sister, my girlfriend, or any woman punched me in the face, I would not even think of hitting them back. When I'm in MMA class, I'm completely okay going up against a dude, but I feel bad or awkward when it comes to a girl. I feel like deep down, a part of me sees them as the weaker sex. My friends think I am a hypocrite for being a feminist, but in those situations, I treat them differently. What do you think, and should equality get to the point where it's okay for men to hit women? Thanks, Steve. I recently lost my father, and your videos helped me out a lot. You deserve more subscribers. Well, thank you very much. In Superman Returns, Superman does not throw a single punch. I don't think that feminism should get to the point where men feel like it's okay to hit women. I think the fact that men used to feel like it was okay to hit women was probably one of the driving forces behind the early feminist movement. The fact that women got together and said, why is this okay? This should not be okay. Look, there's a difference between something being true in principle and something being true in practice. I believe this very strongly. In principle, it should be just as wrong to hit a man as it is to hit a woman. The two things should be the same thing. But in context, in the real world, in our culture, with gender inequality such as it is, with the relatively privileged position of men and the relatively underprivileged position of a woman, I think a man hitting a man and a man hitting a woman are two very different things. I think one is two members of an equally privileged class, and again, it's more complicated than this. I'm talking purely in terms of gender. There are other forms of inequality. It might be a rich guy beating up a poor guy or whatever, and that would alter the balance as well. But just for the sake of argument, for simplicity's sake, we're talking purely in terms of gender here. Two men hitting each other are two members of the same privileged gender hitting each other. A man hitting a woman, in addition to the probable physical differences, because women are not the weaker sex, but on average, physically, most women are smaller and physically weaker than the average man. So you have a probably larger person imposing his size and strength on a physically smaller person. You have a member of a culturally privileged class, someone who has a certain advantage, a certain amount of power in the culture, exerting physical force on a smaller, less privileged person. It's a completely different power dynamic. So I think it's perfectly fine, given the state of our society, that you treat hitting a woman differently than hitting a man. I don't think that's a problem at all. I certainly don't think you should correct for it by starting to hit women. I mean, in self-defense class, I guess maybe you could get used to treating them the same because you're there for training and you're there for sparring and you should treat them the same. But in everyday life, I mean, how about just work on not hitting men or not wanting to hit men so readily? I mean, it's a natural instinct. If somebody fucks with you, you want to fuck with them. But maybe holding back in that area would be a way of closing that gap in the way you treat men versus the way you treat women. The solution certainly is not to get to a point where men are comfortable again with hitting women. Anandera 1980. This isn't my question. This comes from 119 Ministries. They ask, should we stone our children? You know, that's actually a video on the YouTube channel, 119 Ministries. I actually tried to watch that video. I only got about 15 minutes into it. It's like a 35-minute video. And look, as someone who makes long videos where it's just me standing there talking to the camera, I actually felt a little relieved, and I felt a lot better about myself because I thought at least my long-ass talky videos are not a millionth as boring as this guy's. It was such a tedious video, and it was all built around this incredibly intricate, close reading of the Bible, designed to both argue that A, yes, the Bible does command us to stone our children if they are disobedient, and that's okay. We should accept that and celebrate that. And B, we shouldn't do it because the particular circumstances that God sets up in that verse for the stoning of children no longer exist. So it was such an exercise in rationalization, you know, and theodicy in a way, because like, oh yeah, sure, God would allow us to stone our children to death in public, but the circumstances where we should do that aren't in place anymore, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah, really, the answer is no. The answer is no. We should not stone our fucking children. You see, that didn't take me nearly as long. Sib Tigers. So by your definition, I am a feminist. Yet, ask a lot of the vocal feminist activists, and they'd probably tell you that I am an anti-feminist. To be clear, I support giving women, men, trans, and so on the same rights and the same responsibilities. I, however, reject the notion that we must measure equality on the parity of outcomes. To me, equality means giving everyone, regardless of ethnicity, creed, gender, sexual orientation, the same rights, the same responsibilities, and not giving any group a leg up on the others. Given all the studies, is it acceptable to you for people who believe as such to reject the label feminist? If not, why? Why should we, as R.N. Ross said, call ourselves feminists if we disagree with the activism and even go as far as to believe much of the activism today damages the goal? I think you should feel free to accept or not accept the label feminist for whatever reason you want. I don't think you should be forced to identify yourself as a feminist. Now, I do think that there is a sense of the word where you can say that someone is a feminist by definition, or someone is practically speaking a feminist, even if they don't choose to identify as one. The bit about that you say in your question about giving people equal rights and equal responsibility, but not giving another group a leg up on the others, that kind of caught me, because I think the problem is one group already has a leg up on the other. If we're talking in terms of gender, the male group already has a leg up on the female group. So so it doesn't really make sense to me to say, well, we should give everybody the same rights and the same responsibilities, but we shouldn't worry about measuring outcomes because we don't, that's not important. We want to have everybody starting off equally, and then we just let them go. That's fine, but people aren't starting off equally. We're not starting at zero. The men are up here, the women are down here. So giving them equal rights and equal responsibilities at this point is only going to solve so much of the problem. There are cultural and societal things that are still in place that are still keeping women from achieving what they might, or attaining the level of cultural currency and agency that they might, because men have had a very strong advantage for so long. So that part doesn't really make sense to me. Again, it's a matter of principle versus practice. In principle, they should be equal. We shouldn't treat one group differently than another. They should have the same rights, the same responsibilities, the same opportunities. If some of them fail or if some of them succeed, that's just the sort of thing that we would expect. But in reality, that's not the situation. We're not starting at zero. One group already has a leg up, and I think that needs to be corrected for. McKenna McLaughlin, I'm curious for your opinion on this. I've been discovering recently that there are several branches of feminism, and it seems that more and more branches are forming every time I look. Personally, I'm starting to look at all the different branches, many of which are exclusionary to certain types of people, like I look at the 40,000 plus branches of Christianity. How a group of people don't agree with a small portion of the main view, so they break off to make their own, claiming they are the only ones right, while all the others are wrong. What do you think? The claims of exclusivity, the claims that, well, my form of feminism is the most authentic form, that doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Again, as I said in the previous question, I don't tend to worry too much about what type of feminist a person is beyond the fundamental definition. I would rather focus on what we have in common and what we could do together to achieve goals and drive progress. I know. Look, there are some feminists who are very, very strongly anti-transgender people taking part in the movement. I don't like that. I think transgender people should be completely welcome in the feminist movement. I don't really see the point of trying to push them away or trying to denigrate them. And, my friend Meridian Frost said a couple months ago on a webcast that we were both guests on, that if we're going to look at atheism as a human rights movement, and in many ways it is, because we advocate for atheists to be treated equally in society, to be treated the same as religious people, to be able to hold office, to be shown the same respect that a religious person is, to have our disbelief respected the same way as someone's religious belief. So there are a lot of parts of movement atheism that are very much like a human rights movement. And as a human rights movement, I feel, and Josh felt as well, Meridian Frost felt as well, that we should align ourselves with other human rights movements. We should be friends. We should not be sniping at each other. So even if you as an individual atheist are not a feminist, or are not a black civil rights activist or a gay rights activist or whatever, atheism as a whole should be friendly to these other movements, because we all want the same thing. We all want people within our group to receive equal treatment and fair treatment. And the individual groups within feminism I would look at as being the same way. Yes, okay, maybe we have differences. Maybe we see things from different perspectives, or we focus on other issues. Okay, maybe you think patriarchy is really important, and maybe you think that, the economic oppression of women is really important. Maybe you're more intersectional than others. Maybe you don't really worry about that. Maybe you're pro-trans. Maybe you're anti. Let's focus on what we have in common. That's what's important to me. Let's focus on what we have in common. And the more we focus on what we have in common, and not just within our feminist group, but within other human rights groups as well, I think that a lot of that strife and a lot of that bickering will sort of start to simmer down, because we will see, hopefully, that we're all sort of wanting the same thing. We're all moving toward the same goal. That's a total fantasy, but that's what I would like to see happen, and that's what I think. Alan Key 86. Hi Steve, what do you think of the atheist label? It's a term that I only heard recently, and it struck me initially as an appealing position to take. I imagine that most people wouldn't be familiar with the word, but after providing a definition, I think it could lead to a different kind of discussion. Not the typical does God exist debate, but the can God exist? Would you consider yourself an atheist? If not, why not? If yes, then will you change all of your video titles to An Atheist Reads? Thanks, Alan. Well, atheism is a really interesting position to me, and for those of you who don't know and don't feel like looking it up, atheism basically is the position that the question of whether or not God exists is a meaningless question, because we can't determine or define definitively. Of course, you would define it definitively. We can't determine what God is, and since the concept of God cannot be determined and cannot be made to be coherent, then the question of whether God exists or not just isn't important. It's not a meaningful question. That's not how I see it. I look at things more matter-of-factly, more scientifically. And I respond to the question by saying, okay, well, you say God exists. What is the evidence for this God existing? Is there any evidence for this God existing? Is there any reason philosophically that I need to believe that this God exists in order for anything to make sense? No? Okay, I don't believe he exists. Come back to me when you have some evidence or a better argument, and we'll have this discussion again. Until then, I'm an atheist. That's basically my line of thinking. The atheist position is a lot deeper, a lot more philosophical, and gets into deconstructing the concept of God. And I think it's fascinating, and I think it's a great exercise and great to talk about. But my personal position is just based on people making a claim that a given being exists, and me seeing no evidence for that being. So I say, okay, I'm an atheist. Like I don't feel the need to go any deeper into it than that. John Henderson, Steve, what in your opinion is the difference between legitimate religious criticism and real religious persecution? Could there be a case made for persecution in France? Well, first of all, criticism is spoken or written. It's not violent. Legitimate criticism is based on disagreements with a person's position. It's not based on bigotry. It's not based on prejudice. If it's done properly, it should not lead to persecution. And if it does, it's the fault of a persecutor sort of warping it and misusing it. It's not the fault of the criticism itself. I don't know if there's a legitimate case for religious persecution in France or not. I mean, I know that in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo shooting, that things for Muslims in certain areas of France, that certain French people, non-Muslim French people, have responded very poorly to that incident. I know that there's a lot of paranoia among non-Muslims in Europe as a whole about Muslim immigration, a lot of fear and anxiety about, oh, they're going to impose Sharia law, and they're coming in and they're immigrating and they're going to take over. I know there's a lot of tension among certain people about that. I've never lived there, so I don't know what it's like, but I imagine that it must be somewhat analogous to the attitude of many people here in the United States to immigrants coming from south of the border. There's just this feeling that maybe our way of life is endangered somehow, that these people are coming to change us, to take something away from us, to deprive us of something that we find very precious. And maybe that's the attitude of people in Europe too. I don't know. If it is maybe I guess I could maybe make a case that Mexican immigrants are somewhat persecuted in the United States by certain aspects of our culture. I think there are people in the United States who would like to persecute them, even if they wouldn't use that word. So I think there are probably people in France who would like to persecute their Muslim population and are trying to do that. Whether or not they would use that word, they probably wouldn't say, let's persecute the Muslims, but they would propose actions and policies that would lead to that. So I honestly don't know. It sounds like a very sad, very unfortunate situation to me. Yeah, and maybe, I don't know, is that Allah? I said, a couple weeks ago I said it was Odin. It was actually Thor. Maybe Thor has a problem with it too. What do you think, Thor? Are you... No, he's not talking. It's time for...
The Lightning Round. Rapid fire questions. Glib and adequate answers.
It's time, Thor, the Lightning Round. Come on, no? Okay. Tony Reed, this is a question out of desperation. After having seen a recent surge in my own viewership and subscription base, how do you deal with the crazy people who make threats and try to pry into your personal life? Well, I ignore them. And if they are like super legitimately threatening, like I feel like I'm actually in danger, I would call the authorities. I would call the police or the FBI or something. And if they're just being obnoxious pricks and they're being really disruptive on my channel, I block them. The tranny atheist question: at what point did you personally decide to leave the safety of anonymity and show your face on the internet? Why do you think people should or shouldn't do that? Also, how do you feel about the game Minecraft? Well, I showed my face on my very first YouTube video. It just was a decision I made. I was in college at the time. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything to worry about as far as that went. So I just showed my face, It wasn't that big of a deal. it is a big deal to some people. Some people value their anonymity. They don't want to be bothered. They feel like maybe they would be hassled at work or by their family if people found out that they were on YouTube. That's completely fine. People don't have to show their faces if they don't want to. I think it's perfectly legitimate to make a YouTube video with a mask or just do voiceovers or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that at all. For whatever reason you feel it's necessary. And how do I feel about Minecraft? I have never played it, and I have never felt compelled to. So... my sexy kneecaps cock tip experiment. Lightning round question. Steve, do you have a song that you feel relates a lot to you emotionally that makes you cry? For me, it's She's Out of My Life by Michael Jackson. It's one of his lesser known songs. It describes perfectly my breakup and my errors. So do you have one? And also, since I brought it up, what do you think of Michael Jackson's song, She's Out of My Life? If you can listen to it for me. Thanks. Oh, I've heard that song. I like that song. I mean, it's a little melancholy for Mike. I like a more upbeat, up-tempo Michael Jackson, but it's a good song. Yeah, mine would probably be Bruce Springsteen's If I Should Fall Behind. That's kind of my wife and I's song. I love that song. Such a beautiful song. And a great expression of like love and commitment and loyalty. It's a really, really great song to me. Godless Help. What do you think of? And then he linked me to the video by Mr. Deity called Way of the Mister Fuck the Pope, where he's responding to the Pope's comments about how you shouldn't provoke religious people by mocking their religion, etc. I thought it was an awesome video. I thought it was great. I agree with him completely. Sarah Shelsing, can you bring back mail call? Oh, well, mail call doesn't exist anymore in the newspaper. It's gone. I actually toyed with the idea of doing like a revisiting episode, sort of like a riffing on mail call redux, where I would riff on... just for one video, I would just riff on the new comment feature in the paper called feedback. But now that people have to give their names attached to the comments, they're not nearly crazy enough. It's just not. It wouldn't nearly be as much fun. So I'm afraid the mail call series is over. Sabrina Loizides Meredith. Hey Steve, I have a movie-related question for you. I was watching your series on zombie movies at Halloween, and it got me thinking. Do you have a favorite modern movie monster slasher? It could be anyone from the last 50 years or so, but the character must have been in multiple movies. Also, do you have a favorite horror movie director from the same era? I love Freddy Krueger. I think I like that Freddy eventually became kind of a comedian. He was like those later Freddy movies, even though they're kind of awful, they're also funny because Freddy is just so funny in them. So I would go with Freddy probably. As for favorite horror movie director, well, if you're going to let me go back 50 years, then I would pick Terrence Fisher, who directed some of the greatest of the Hammer horror films. And within that 50-year window, there are still a few of his really, really good movies, including, I think, Dracula Prince of Darkness, which is one of my favorites. So yeah, Terrence Fisher. Great, great horror director. Patrick Dodds. Steve, if there was one movie you've never got to see on the big screen, but were given the opportunity, what would it be? That's a great question. I kind of went back and forth with which one it would be if I were to take that opportunity. And I finally landed on Superman the movie, the original Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman Superman. I've never seen that on the big screen. I would love to see Superman on the big screen. Hotshot is number one. Hey, Steve. As someone who's been following you for about 2 years now, I just want to say that I love your work and hope to see you continue to make awesome videos. Now that my admittedly generic, congratulatory, encouraging sentency thing is out of the way, are you excited to be seeing how Ceres and Pluto, among with its moons, look up close? I sure am. P.S. What is your whole opinion on Pluto being classified as a dwarf planet? He's talking about the New Horizons probe, which later this year is finally going to reach the outer solar system, or the realm of Pluto and Ceres and the minor planets. It's been on its way for almost 10 years, and it's finally going to reach its ultimate destination, or its final intended destination this year. I cannot wait. I am really, really actually super excited about it. What's my opinion on Pluto being classified as a dwarf planet? I don't care. I actually think the new definition of planets that rendered Pluto not a planet but a dwarf planet was a good definition, was fine. I have no problem with Pluto being a dwarf planet as opposed to a proper planet. It actually makes more sense and it's more consistent that way. Dr. Themo, hey Steve, do you think it's reasonable to take the position of I don't know in regards to the Bill Cosby case? Well, it depends on why you're taking it. If you're taking the position of I don't know because you are admitting that you lack a certain amount of knowledge and you don't know for certain, then I think that's fair. If you're taking the position to say, I don't know, as a sort of soft defense of Cosby, because you really don't think he did it, but you are pleading ignorance so that, or you don't want to think he did it, so you're just using that to sort of plead ignorance to avoid having to believe that he did it, then I don't think that's fair. I would also suggest that if 24 men had come forward accusing someone of a heinous crime committed multiple times over decades, we would probably be taking their accusations a bit more seriously than we are taking Mr. Cosby's. And even, even if children came forward and accused Cosby of molesting them, I think we'd be taking it a lot more seriously than we are taking these women who are accusing Cosby of rape, and I think that's unfortunate. Connor Jack, The Lonesome Crowded West or Moon in Antarctica? Oh, damn you, Connor Jack! Lonesome Crowded West. Lonesome Crowded West is one of my favorite albums ever. But Moon in Antarctica is amazing as well. It's a tough choice for me, but Lonesome Crowded West has got to be it. Okay, that's it for the questions, everybody. I am about to get the hell out of here, but before I do, I'm going to give a shout-out. And the shout-out this week is one that I've had requested by a couple of people in the last few weeks, and it is a really excellent channel. So the shout-out this week goes to Atheist Mom. Atheist Mom is a really cool channel. As you may have deduced from the name, this is about a mom who is an atheist. She makes videos about being an atheist, and it's a really cool channel. It's kind of a small channel. It could use some more attention, some more subscribers, some more views, but she just started a new series called Women of the Bible. Again, guess what that one's about? And it's a really interesting series. Most of the videos are kind of short. I think she's up to 4 episodes now. The first episode, of course, is about Eve. And she just goes through the various prominent women in the Bible, talks about how they're described, how they're depicted in the text, how they're sort of perceived in Christianity, how their examples are used to sort of push particular roles or particular attitudes on women or about women within the church. It's a really, really cool series, and I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend Atheist Mom. Check out her channel. It is well worth your time. Well, that's it. I'm done. That's it for me. I will be back next week to do this all over again, provided, of course, that you guys ask me some questions, because for this to happen, you have to ask. So leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of them as I can. So I'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.